Hi, I'm Mike from Craft Supplies USA, and today we're going to show you how to set up and use the Woodcut Bowlsaver Max 4. Before we use it, we'll take this out of the box, show you how to set it up, and then we'll get to the lathe and show you how to use it. The Bowlsaver Max 4 is a great way to utilize those big blanks and to get multiple blanks out of a single block. It's an all-in-one system that'll maximize the yield out of your blanks, and it comes with everything you need to get into bowl coring. Let's take the lid off this box and show you what it comes with. So you have your woodcut catalog. This is the instruction manual that shows you how to set up and use it. And then on the top here they have their guides to show you for different sizes of the blades that it comes with. It shows you where your pivot bolt will be and then the depth and size of your core out. So definitely keep these around. The only thing I wish is that these would be made out of plastic or metal. They'd be a little more durable than the paper. So we'll set those off to the side and we'll take off the foam cover. And you can see everything's packaged really well inside the box here, so nothing's getting banged around in shipping. But let's cover each of the components and we'll tell you what they're for. Alright, so we'll start out with the blades. It comes with 3 sizes of blades, and this unit will do bowls from 3 inches to 18 inches in diameter. From there we have our base plate unit. This is all pre-assembled and ready to go. Then we have our handle and blade clamp piece right here. Next we have our Morse taper. This is going to be our taper adapter for our drawbar system. That's going to help really solidify the entire unit once it's on the lathe. This is the tool post adapter with the collar, so that way it's at the same height setting every time you put this on and off the lathe. Here we have the handle. This is a 20-inch handle with a nice neoprene wrap on it, which is really comfortable to use. Down in this pocket is our 3/8 drawbar. This goes in our Morse taper piece, and this is a lot longer than it needs to be, but they go oversized on it so it can fit a bunch of different lathes. And what you'll do is you'll stick this in the Morse taper adapter piece here, thread it all the way in, and then leave about 2 inches sticking out of the end of your tailstock, and then cut off the rest. And we'll show you that as we get this set up. And then this little screw post here is our threaded handle adapter, and this goes into our blade clamp and our handle mount right here, so that just threads in. And then it comes with all the tools you need to assemble the entire unit as well. So it's nice having everything ready to go, pre-packaged in a box. You don't have to buy a bunch of extra pieces. So let's get these out, we'll set it up, and we'll show you how to use it. Alright, so the first thing I like to do is I'll get my Morse taper clamp block piece, and you'll loosen this all the way off. Then I'll rotate this over so you can see it, but we'll set our threads coming up from the underside, and then one side of this piece has a flat on it, and that's the side that we want facing down. So if you need to, you can rotate this up on its side, and then we'll just thread this in. And I'll keep these parts loose because once we go to the lathe, we'll have to adjust and move pieces around to make it fit on our lathe. So just go nice and loose. From there, we'll get our tool rest post. So the nice thing about this is it sets in and we have a nice tapered washer that'll screw into the top. And then once we go on the lathe, we'll set our cutting height, and from there we'll lock these set screws down, and that's going to keep this in the same place every time. That way you don't have to adjust and set up every time you take it on and off the lathe. So we'll slide this piece out of the way, and this post just goes straight up in here. Rotate that over so you can see. And then we'll get our tapered flat washer, and then we'll just screw this post right in. On this screw, I would go ahead and snug this down now. Because this piece we won't be adjusting. And then I'll raise up the locking collar just out of the way and then just snug that down so it's not interfering when we go to set our cutter height. So once that's done, we'll get our post for our handle, and that's going to screw into the back of this. And what I like to do is make sure this is fully seated. And then I'll get my handle, and it has 2 set screws, and I'll make sure one of those set screws is on that flat. And then we can go ahead and tighten this down as well. Alright, from there we can set this on to the coring unit. And these 3 long bolts are what's going to be use to keep this in place. And because we haven't put the cutters in yet, you just want these nice and loose. And this is how you change your blades as well. So you'll loosen it and you can slide the blades right out. Okay, and I'll keep that loose for now. And then this is our drawbar with a washer and a wing nut. I would measure your tailstock and then cut this off, cut any excess length off. I'll show you how mine looks once it's on the lathe, but this rod is definitely longer than it needs for most lathes. So this unit's basically ready to put on the lathe, but before we do that, I want to talk about these blades for a second. So we have the 3 sizes, and they'll go from 3 inches to 18 inches in diameter, and these have a different cutter than most coring units on the market. The cutter itself is actually brazed onto the knife, and it's a stellite cutter. And the reason they went with stellite is it's a really shock-resistant type of metal, so that way when you hit a knot or a nail, really hard things, it doesn't chip the cutter and damage it. A lot of the other cutters, if it's a high-speed steel cutter like M2 or M4 and the carbide ones, is if there's a nail or something hard inside the wood and you core into it, you're going to snap your cutter off. So that's why they went with stellite. And these can be sharpened with a CBN wheel lightly or a diamond hone to sharpen these cutters. From the factory, they're really sharp, good to use out of the box. And you can replace the cutters if you need to. They sell replacement stellite bits you can have brazed on, or you can buy new blades that are complete. So let's get this stuff off the table, get the table out of the way. We'll bring our lathe in and we'll get this set up and show you how to core with it. All right, so before we get the coring unit set up, I want to talk about the blank selection and prep before you ever start coring. And right now I've got a piece of 12 by 5.5 inch piece of walnut, and this is really wet green wood. And when you're coring bowls out, there's a ton of force exerted on your tenon in your chuck and the chuck jaws, and you have to make sure that the fit between the chuck jaws and your tenon are perfect. If there's any gaps or the chuck jaw faces right here aren't seated anywhere along this face here, the piece of wood's going to move in your chuck jaws because there's so much force cutting through the end grain in these bowls that it can cause your piece to come out of the chuck, or you can cause a lot of unnecessary vibration. So you want to make sure that you have a really clean cut tenon and a really good fit between your chuck jaws and the piece you're going to be coring. So I'll get this piece mounted on before we set up our coring unit. Make sure that my fit is good to go. And when we're coring out bowls, I'll really snug these down, and I like this offset T-handle. That way I can get more leverage with the handle here and really crank down on my tenon. But having a correctly formed tenon is going to be crucial to the success of you coring, because if you have a bad tenon here, it's going to be really bad when you start coring, because it's not a very clean cut with any coring unit, and it puts so much force once you make the corner down here and you start cutting into the end grain fibers. It's just brutal, especially if you have a really bad foot. So I just inspect the jaws here, make sure there's no gaps. Looks like we got a nice tight fit, and we have a proper length of tenon for our chuck jaws. So that's ready to go. So now we can bring up our tool rest. I'll just get that kind of in the center, move my tailstock back, take out any accessories that you have on the lathe. We don't use our tool rest at all, so we'll take that off, set it aside. And then we can grab our base unit that has all the pieces we assembled on the table. We'll just drop that in for now, get that nice and loose. And then this is our drawbar rod. You can see I've cut this one down quite a bit from the almost 2 foot section they gave us before. And now we can bring up our tailstock here. So I'll just slide that right through the quill. And then we'll adjust the plate to where we can then screw it into our Morse taper adapter piece. All right, so we'll just line that up and slide this in. And what I like to do is just extend my quill a little bit and then slide it the rest of the way. And then from there we can thread that drawbar all the way until you stop threading it in and it bottoms out. Once that bottoms out, use that washer and the wing nut just to secure everything, and that's going to keep this plate more secured because now we have 2 points of contact. We've got our tool rest and the tailstock both supporting this base unit. From there, what we'll do is I'll use the small knife for now, and we'll set our height of the unit. And we should be pretty close, but as far as the blades go, there's 3 slots in this unit. We have the small blade slot, the medium blade slot, and then the large. And there's just 3 little grooves. So now we have our small blade here. You just put it in the slot and slide it till it bottoms out on the back side here. And then we can tighten down these 3 hex nuts. Fortunately, these hex nut size actually fit the VM100 key, and I find it a lot quicker to use this key instead of just the little Allen wrench that comes with the unit. So I like to get these nice and snug. Once they're all snug down, just double check each bolt, make sure they're still snug. And then that blade is secure. And what we're looking for with our height of our cutting edge is the cutting edge should be directly on center with your workpiece. So you can eyeball that, you can draw a line, just make sure that your cutting edge is set directly at center. If it's above or below center, it's going to affect the way this blade functions. So you want to make sure that's nice and running true on center here. So once you have your cutting edge set at center height, tighten your banjo and then adjust and tighten the locking collar on the tool post adapter. Those little 2 set screws are going to keep your height consistent every time you take this on and off the lathe. And once we have everything pretty much set up now, we can go and test fit and see what size of core we're going to be taking out of this piece, and then adjust the base unit forward, back, left, or right, depending on what size of core we're looking for and what our overall goal is that we're trying to accomplish. So the nice thing is it comes with these 3 guides, so it's going to be your depth of cut and the width of cut as well. So we'll be using the small blade, so I'll use the small jig here. And it says on the front, this is your center pivot bolt, so that's going to go right here. And then this is going to be the back of the blank that we core out. So right now we're at about 2.5, 3 inches deep. That's about where we want to be for our depth, but right now we're taking a really wide bowl out of here, and it's not going to leave us enough room for a better second core. And on this size of piece, I would rather sacrifice the smaller inner bowl and have 2 good, bigger size bowls. So basically what we'll do is we'll just core out the center of this in a small bowl. That way it'll help with the drying process for that medium size bowl. And what we can do is we'll lay that out with a pen. So we'll turn our lathe on, a few hundred RPM. And for that inner bowl, something like that is about the size I want to just take out, just so I get that material out of the way so the second bowl dries quicker. And we're looking for 1 inch to 1.25 inches thick on our bowls for rough outs. That way if they move, we still have enough room to turn those to true. So this is going to be our second bowl diameter. So if I stop the lathe here, so we're going to core all this section out just to get rid of it. This is going to be our second core, and then this will be the outside, the third core, the outer bowl. So I'm pretty happy with that layout there. If this was just another 2 inches wider, I could get a really good third bowl out of the center here and make it actually usable, but this is just going to be scrap in the center for now, just due to the size of the bowl and the constraints we're working with. So what we want to do is we want to center up our cutting edge on our marks that we've made. And the nice thing about this too is these blades are basically a quarter of a circle, so it gives you a full circle, so it makes your cutting arc a lot more predictable because you know it's going to be a nice even circle when you do this. Loosen up that tailstock, that way you can slide the entire unit closer or further away. And let's check our gauge. I probably want to back that off about a 1/2 inch so that way we don't go too deep. Alright, I think we'll start there. So this blade's going to make entry right here, and we're going to cut just a small little bowl out of the center just to get rid of that scrap material. I could slide it out just a touch. Loosen this locking handle up. There we go, and that's going to start cutting just on the outside of our second line. Once you're happy with your cutting arc and you've checked it out with your gauges and make sure everything's going to cut the way you want it to, tighten down the quill, the banjo, your tool post locking lever, and then the Morse taper adapter lever as well. Once those are all secured, we're ready to start coring. So I'll move this stuff out of the way. So once everything's locked down, the recommended coring speed for this unit is 300 to 400 RPM. If it's your first time using it, I'd probably start a little slower, around 200 to 300. Get a feel for the unit a little bit, then you can bump the speed up. So let's turn our lathe on at 0, and then we'll slowly increase our speed. Alright, so right now we're at about 320 RPM. And Woodcut recommends for coring a minimum of a 1.5 power motor. I would say really you need a 2 horsepower motor to do any coring, and you're probably going to have to drop down to that lower pulley so you have more torque. But if you had 3 horsepower, that's ideal for coring because there's just so much load and friction on the motor because this isn't a super clean cut. We're kind of forcing the tool through the wood. So make sure everything's locked down. Make sure you have proper eye protection, safety protection. And on this lathe, because it has the remote start-stop, I'm actually going to move that over here because I'll be over here coring for the most of the time. And if I do have a catch or the piece starts coming out of the chuck, I want to be able to shut it off here and I'll have to reach around the lathe and be in the line of fire. So let's start coring, and the first thing you want to do is make sure you just gently start cutting. And as it's cutting through the side grain, this part's pretty easy, but once we start to round that corner and hit the end grain, that's when it's going to start to get grabby. You want to back the cutter out of the way and clear the chips every now and again, because a lot of times once you start getting down in there, the chips kind of bind up and get in the way of the cutter. So just back the blade out of the way, and if you need to, use some compressed air to blow the shavings out, and then keep cutting. Advance the cutter nice and slowly. You don't want to force this through the wood. Just give it a little bit of pressure and just keep it nice and consistent. If the blade stalls the motor out like that, just pull the cutter out a little bit and then start the cut again. One other thing too, your natural tendency is to pull down on the handle. That's not what you want to do. When you pull down on it, it brings that cutter up just enough to where it makes it more aggressive. So if anything, keep it a neutral grip or just push up on the handle slightly as you're cutting. Again, back that cutter out of the way, clear the chips, give the new chips somewhere to go. So I had a cutter, or I had a shaving on the tip of the cutter where it wasn't actually cutting, and then the shaving broke and then dug in a little bit. So we just cut through the catch there. Anytime you have a catch, it tears those fibers down in there, and then you go to start the cut again and it digs in really bad because those fibers are all peeled out and sticking out. So just be careful. If you do have a catch, when you go back in to make another cut, be really slow as you advance that cutter edge until it cuts through the tear out and then cuts clean again. And I've got a little bit of upward pressure on the handle. And once we go past center, the bowl will pop out of the way, and then we can stop our lathe. So we've got all the bulk of this out of the way. That way this bowl here is going to dry fairly evenly. Ideally, I would take this off, get my tool rest out, and then give myself a nice, better curve in here. Try to remove a little more material just to speed up drying, but I think this will be just fine as it is. So once we've done the inner bowl, now we can switch blades to the medium blade to make this next curve. So I'll grab my medium blade and then my VM100 T-handle wrench. And this is just an 8mm wrench. You can find these at a lot of stores if you want to get one for this unit, if you don't already have one. Once those are just a little bit loose, you can slide your knife out. Set that back in the box and we'll get our medium blade out. Clean off our plate. One thing I forgot to mention so far is this machine piece of aluminum plate that this thing moves on is really smooth and easy to control. It's actually a really nice unit to use. I think probably one of the best things about this unit is it's so quick and easy to set up. If you're doing a bunch of bowl core outs, all you gotta do is take your drawbar out, loosen this and loosen that, and you can pop this off, throw your next bowl on, rough it out, put this back on. It's really quick and easy. So make sure these are all nice and tight. And then we'll grab our medium setup jig. So I know I'm gonna have to move the unit back towards center this way a little bit. I think our depth is actually pretty close. So we've got about 1.5 inches right here that we'll have in wall thickness on the bottom. I could probably move this forward 1/4 inch. So I'll loosen the banjo, I'll loosen the quill, and I'll actually just slide this entire assembly forward. And then I'm gonna loosen my Morse taper adapter piece and then slide the unit towards me just a touch. And then just double check. See, the cutter is going to be about 1/4 inch too far this way. So I'll slide that back over. And then bring this back in. And for some reason on the 3520 and the 2020s, the handle hits this quill locking lever. So you just kind of have to bump it up and over. But that's right where we want our cutter to be. Let's check our depth. That's going to be about right on. We got about 1.25 inch wall thickness in the bottom of our outside bowl. So that's going to be perfect. So I'll make sure the cutter's out of the way, make sure everything's nice and tight again. Quill, banjo, tool post lock and lever, make sure everything's still nice and secured, and then we can start our lathe. One other thing I forgot to mention, between cores, I like to just make sure that this chuck is still tight because there's so much vibration going through this piece. Those chuck jaws tend to loosen up just a little bit, so just make sure everything's nice and snug as you go to your different size of bowl cores. Again, we're at that 300 RPM. If you need to start a little slower, go ahead, but don't exceed 400 RPM. We'll clear those shavings out of the way. It was binding up just a little bit, but you can see the shavings we get out of this unit. They're these big kind of chunky ribbons, and they tend to get stuck inside that little gap made by the cutter. So make sure you clear those out. If you have a compressor, it's nice to just blow that out really quick. But let's keep coring. Now you can see just how much shavings we had built up inside the wall there. So make sure you definitely take the time to clear that out. And then now that we're getting pretty close to the bottom, I've probably about 1 inch of travel left to go. You can either core this all the way down to the center and just let the piece pop out and roll on the floor, or you can stop it about 1/2 inch short and then tap the piece out of the way. Depending on the wood though, sometimes if it's really stringy, it won't break cleanly. So I would probably just cut it all the way off and let it come out. But that's up to you. All right, we're right at the bottom, and then we'll let that piece come out. All right, let me take the coring unit off now that we have our cores out of the way, and I'll show you how to do this as well. So first thing we want to do is we'll take our drawbar out with our washer. I'll loosen the banjo, loosen my quill locking lever, and then we'll back that Morse taper adapter piece out. loosen up the banjo locking lever, and then this entire unit just comes out in one piece. So the nice thing is you can leave this whole unit pretty much assembled and then just set it off to the side. For this piece, the next thing I would do is I'd get my bowl gouge and just get a little bit better profile on the inside and thin it out down here in the bottom. It's kind of thick. So I'd rough that out, and then I'd get my 2 cores. If you had a 3rd core, then I'd coat these in tree saver, let them dry, and then set them off to the side and let them fully dry and get them ready to turn for the next bowl project you need to do. So the Max 4 coring system is a little expensive, but it comes with every single thing you need, whereas the one-way, you have to buy a different base unit and knife sets. And if you got all the knife sets for a one-way, you'd be a little more expensive than the Max 4. So it's nice that it's all included in the kit, and it has such a wide range. And the curve of the blades, I think, is a little bit better than the one-ways as well. So you've got the 3 to 18 inches of range, and you get a really nice, perfectly rounded bowl shape. And the other thing too is, if you have a nice piece of wood like this and you turn those inner bowls just into shavings, it costs a lot more money to get more bowls. So now I can do a nice 8-inch bowl out of this walnut. Then I've got this 12-inch bowl, and if it was a little bigger, I could have another one. So it makes your turning blank money go quite a bit further, because you can get 3 or 4 pieces out of a single block of wood that you buy. And if someone wants just the big bowl, you'll have another couple smaller bowls you can save for other projects. But it makes it a lot more efficient and a lot less waste. Plus, you don't have to deal with as many shavings, turning this whole thing into a single bowl. So, and if you have any questions about the coring units or the other coring units we sell, go ahead and reach out to our tech support line, or you can leave a comment in the comment section below. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more wood turning videos.